as we look at this Fighting Irish football team going into, I guess, the latter stages of fall camp, a lot of things have been decided, but I guess the one looming conversation we have to have is the left side of the Fighting Irish offensive line. I know the media had the chance to watch a couple of practices in a row with Anthonie Knapp at left tackle and Sam Pendleton at left guard, so that led to a bunch of questions on Saturday. You heard from Marcus Freeman. You heard from Mike Denbrock. How would you evaluate where things stand right now in the competition for the left side of the offensive line?
Short answer, up in the air. We don't know. We don't know who's going to start there. I think, as you said, the more practices we watch, the more that we hear from the coaches that this is a competition between Anthonie Knapp and Tosh Baker at the tackle position, and Pat Coogan, Rocco Spindler, and of course Sam Pendleton, who's getting those first team reps as a sophomore at the left guard position. The more that lingers, Darren, the more that it tells me that they think they have something special, they being the Notre Dame coaches, in the younger guys. Anthonie Knapp is probably a long-term answer. I don't know at tackle, because Darren, when I look at him, I see a mauler of a guard, and he looks like a guy that could line up on the interior and just do all those different things that you ask a guard to do versus what you ask a tackle to do. But Darren, as Notre Dame and Marcus Freeman said in his press conference, you have to figure out what is the best solution for week one. That could be different than week 5. I think this is an ongoing process. That's why I use the words up in the air. Quite frankly, because you don't know what you have in Anthonie Knapp or Sam Pendleton, because they have not played football at this level. But as I wrote over the weekend, Darren, after listening to these coaches speak, did we really know for sure what we had in Charles Jagasaw as a left tackle? He's only made one start in his career. Tosh Baker has only made 3 or 4 in his Notre Dame career, and he's been here 4 or 5 seasons now. So it's a lot of question marks. You're going to get some answers at Texas A&M. You're going to get some answers against Northern Illinois and Purdue and Miami of Ohio. I think you're not going to know for sure, Darren, what Notre Dame really has on that side of the offensive line until you get into October. And your hope is maybe you beat Texas A&M and maybe you take care of all these games that you're going to be favored in, and you do have the answers. Is it Knapp? Is it Baker? Is it the seniors at guard position by Florida State in mid-November? That's when you want to have everything kind of finalized. And this is a team that thinks it's going to play in the college football playoff. You better have a pretty secure offensive line by November and December.
See, I like what you said and bringing up Denbrock and Freeman's comments from Saturday that the starters in week 1, it may look totally different in week 5 and 6. I'd go far enough to say I wouldn't be shocked, Tyler, that if Northern Illinois was the first game and not at Texas A&M, you might see the younger guys starting this game. To me, going with a veteran guy at left tackle might make some sense going to Texas A&M. Now, I want the best player to play, but even a little experience going down to College Station in front of that crowd with all the expectations seems like a route they may go, and maybe that's why Marcus framed things the way he did on Saturday.
Definitely left the door open, Darren, to Tosh Baker playing at left tackle in that game, which is what you were alluding to there, is what Marcus Freeman did on Saturday when he said we have experience. And I think he was more so talking about Rocco Spindler and Pat Coogan at the guard positions when he said, hey, we have the experience, because they do have a lot of it. And again, Tosh Baker's been here this is his 5th season. He doesn't have a whole lot of experience. He of course, was in that musical chairs. That's what I like to call it in 2021, where Notre Dame finally settled on Joe Alt, and that was the answer. But you got to remember, it was Tosh Baker before that, and it was Michael Carmody before that, and they finally got to Joe Alt. You don't want that to happen, but Darren, it's very possible that Tosh Baker goes out there against Texas A&M because, like you said, he's the experienced guy, and that's who they want to play. I wouldn't be surprised if Nick Scorton and some of these other defensive players that Texas A&M has that can threaten Notre Dame, if they get to Tosh Baker and then you put Anthonie Knapp in there in the same game and maybe Anthonie Knapp isn't holding up as well, I think you're setting a pretty bad precedent for what this season can be for Notre Dame along the offensive line. So the hope is whoever you put out there in College Station at least does his job to the ability of saying, okay, we're not sure if this is what we're going to have, like you said, Darren, for the entire season, but at least we know it's not the worst case scenario. And whoever this guy is that's playing for us out there can play football up to this level.
Before we started to hear about the Knapp-Pendleton combination, I was watching the Las Vegas line, and all of a sudden Notre Dame went from a pick 'em And then in some spots, they were a 1-point underdog. In one particular betting industry location, they were a 2.5-point underdog. So Las Vegas must have had a little indication something was going on with the Irish offensive line. There was no real reason to make Notre Dame such a big underdog all of a sudden. So putting aside Las Vegas, this offensive line, I hate calling it drama because drama seems like a negative, but with some things up in the air, has it caused you any caution in still picking Notre Dame to win this game? Has your thought on the game changed at all?
I've been thinking more big picture when
Okay.
this offensive line thing came out. I'm thinking, oh man, is Notre Dame going to be able to do what it wants to do in 2024 as a whole if this is going to be the case with the offensive line? And of course, a lot of that we will find out against Texas A&M. We will, again, I use the word precedent. We're going to find out what we're going to be talking about in terms of the Notre Dame offensive line for the entire season, or at least the first month or two of it, with based on what happens at Texas A&M. So now speaking about the game in particular, I do think it is worrisome because Texas A&M does have some pass rushers, and I keep going back to the fact that it's coached now, the Aggies are, by a defensive-minded head coach in Mike Elko, and he's going to throw some things at Notre Dame that, quite frankly, hurt Notre Dame when the Irish went to Durham and almost lost a football game last year. I mean, it was a slog of a football game, and Mike Elko had a lot to do with that based on what he was doing, coaching up the Duke defense. So now he's coaching up some Texas A&M players that are very, very talented. And like you said, they can get to this Notre Dame offensive line because it's a Notre Dame offensive line. Even if Charles Jagasaw was your starter and say throw Pat Coogan in there, still starting at left guard, say those are your starters and we know who's starting on the right side, you're still talking about less than 20 college starts. And Pat Coogan has 13 of those. And he might not even start, Darren. It might be Sam Pendleton, who we were talking about earlier. So the way it's looking, the last thing that we saw from the Notre Dame offensive line in these practices, you're talking about 3 combined starts, I believe. And Ashton Craig has all of those. That's a pretty crazy situation, or maybe 6, excuse me, because Billy Strouth has 3 as well. So you have Ashton Craig with 3 starts at center and Billy Strouth at right guard, who has 3 starts. Emil Wagner has never started a college football game. Neither have these other 2 younger guys in Knapp and Pendleton that we're talking about. So absolutely, to go back to the crux of your question, it definitely affects the way that you think about this football game, because I've gotten some mentions from some Texas A&M fans on the old social media app, and they're feeling pretty good when they read, oh, this is what Notre Dame is throwing out at offensive line. It's time for our guys to feast. That's the way that they're thinking down there, at least.